I'm Tim Gunn, and it is an honor to be moderating this incredibly esteemed panel this evening and to celebrate the legacy of film legend and icon Cary Grant. I have to tell you though, I just met our panel. I feel like a mongrel at the Westminster Kennel Club. I really do. They are just staggering individuals, and as a group, they're really quite overwhelming. So our panel is, of course, they're experts and insiders, and you will meet them. So let me begin the introductions with Jennifer Grant. Yay. Come, Jennifer. Jennifer is executive producer of Archie. She is the daughter of Dyan Cannon and Cary Grant, the only daughter. And not surprisingly, she's an actress with many, many film and television credits. Jennifer is also the author of a wonderful memoir, Good Stuff, which I have right here, a reminiscence of my father, Cary Grant. It is heartwarming and very moving and filled with so many fabulous stories, Jennifer. I was completely captivated.
Thank you, Tim.
Beautiful, beautiful book. Next, we have Jeff Pope. Jeff is executive producer and the writer of Archie. Oh, Jeff's taking big strides. He is an award-winning writer for film and television. Jeff's credits are many, including Philomena, starring Judi Dench, for which he received every major award nomination and won BAFTA and Venice Film Festival awards for Best Adapted Screenplay. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next, we have one of my favorite actors, Jason Isaacs. Jason is the star of Archie, and a better Cary Grant there couldn't possibly be, and it's true. Jason's filmography is extensive, as are his many awards and nominations, and owing to the cultural phenomenon that is Harry Potter, Jason may be best known as Professor Malfoy in the Harry Potter films.
Yeah.
And knowing you, what a transformation that role must have been.
No, that's the real me. This is
And finally, we have another icon and legend in Dyan Cannon. Dyan is a former Mrs. Cary Grant, and she is executive producer of Archie, and all of you know her for remarkable film roles, but what you may not know is that she's the first woman in the history of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences to be nominated for Oscars both as an actress and a filmmaker. She is the author of Dear Cary, My Life with Cary Grant, which was published in 2011, and very much like Jennifer's memoir, it is so heartfelt and so filled with so many surprising anecdotes. I highly, highly, highly recommend this. Nothing about it is boilerplate. It's all really just true grit.
Thank you.
So welcome, panelists. So, Dyan and Jennifer, how did you choose this moment to devise this incredibly ambitious project about Cary Grant?
You want to go first, Britt?
Sure. I would say that we did not devise it. Jeff very much devised it. And had it not been Jeff, it probably wouldn't have happened. He had a very unique, thoughtful take on Dad and his life.
He came to me about 10 years ago.
Oh.
It's been that long. Said he read the book, really enjoyed it, let's make a movie. I said, let's talk about it. So we talked about it for about a year. And then he came back again and said, how about this, how about that? And it turned out that a film, an hour and a half long, wouldn't contain everything that he wanted it to contain.
It couldn't.
No,
No.
it couldn't. 4 hours can't.
No, it's true. I want more.
Now it's 4 hours instead of just an hour and a half film, and it's because of his tenacity and his brilliance.
And I have to say, your book is very cinematic.
Oh yes, I thank you.
It's very, very cinematic. You can picture everything. Jeff, for you, what was the initial catalyst?
The bottom book first. I'm at an airport, about to embark on a long haul flight, and looking for something to occupy the journey. And I saw Jennifer's book, and flicked through the flyleaf, and I thought, I didn't know Cary Grant.
It's all right, you can answer it, it's fine. Might be my agent.
I was trying to keep. I thought I didn't know really at the height of his power. He effectively gave it up to become a stay-at-home dad. I didn't know that. I didn't know he was married to Dyan. I didn't know he had a daughter. So it was intriguing, and then I read it, and it was fascinating. And then I found out that Jennifer's mother's Dyan, and I knew Dyan, remembered Dyan from the movies she'd made. Then I read her book. And then I was staying at a hotel in Altaloma Road at the top, and Dyan lives at the bottom. I didn't know this until I reached out and said, can I come and talk to you? And she said, where are you staying? And I said,
I'm outside your window, right?
Sunset Marquee. She said, you got about 400 yards. And we met in the middle. And that was the beginning. And I spent a lot of time with Dyan. And then I spent, finally, where I started with Jennifer. And we spent such a long time talking, and you know, we had great days walking. I vividly remember us walking along Malibu Beach, and this is where we used to live. And then Jennifer and I mean, I'm condensing it all, but Jennifer and I spent an amazing day, a couple of days in Bristol, where we went to the house where your father was born, and we just looked at each other and said, what the hell? And we knocked on the door, and there was a wonderful elderly lady who lives there, who only got back from church about 10 minutes before, wasn't it? Jennifer always says, if we'd have delayed, if we'd gone for a coffee, we'd have missed, or if we'd have got there early, we'd have missed. And so Jennifer got to be in the house where her dad was born, stand in the bedroom where he slept, and look at the view that he looked at, which
Still the same.
it
still
wasn't
the same.
wildly different. But you know, these are sort of headlines. It was a lot of hard work.
Oh, of course.
And it was very difficult. It was difficult to get it made. You know, there's a UK broadcaster called ITV who came in with some of the budget, and then Britbox. That's the reason that the project happened at the end, because they said, we want to do this. And so we still in streamer terms, it was a relatively low budget. Jason agreed to do it for nothing. And but I remember a conversation we had, and Jennifer, I was worried that Dyan and Jennifer would think, well, hang on a minute, how can we do this? And it was Jennifer that said, oh, I get it. This is the indie version of this story. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And we went on this journey. It was filmed in Liverpool, which doubled for the interior of Benedict Canyon, and Bristol, and New York, because if anyone ever goes to Liverpool, it's extraordinary. Some of those Art Deco buildings in Liverpool, you can believe that you're in New York. And then Benedict Canyon doubled for Malaga. And then I'm afraid Jason had a spray tan. It wasn't a real tan, just giving it away.
Jason, tell us about your own involvement.
Well, I heard that someone was making life story of Cary Grant, and I thought, what a fucking idiot that person is. Why would anybody try and do something like that? But I'm so sorry. I swear when I get in public, despite what my parents told me, I think it is actually rather clever and grown up. I thought that's a terrible idea. Then I saw Jeff's name was on it, and Jeff's got a long history of taking real life stories and making brilliant drama out of them. So I read it, and I thought, oh, of course, it's not the story of Cary Grant. It's the story of Archie Leach.
Yes.
Because Cary Grant was famously those things outside the front door, but inside the front door and inside his marriage, all of the fault lines, all of the scars, all of the aching need from his damaged childhood came into play. And it made sense to me. So I read this thing, and I went to see Jeff, and I stayed in the office for, I don't know, 5 hours or 6 hours all day. I went, I don't know about this, what about this? And he went, yeah, that's a good idea. I feel like changing that. Why don't you jump in the pit? If you don't completely love it, why don't you be an EP? And as good as his word, because I had this experience slightly before in my life, he's the most collaborative person I've ever worked with in my life. And he had done 99.9% of the work, but once I knew I got to tell the story of somebody that felt relevant, it wasn't about something that happened in the past, it's how badly a marriage and a life can go wrong if you don't deal with the scars of your childhood. I wanted to do it. And the thing that most made me want to do it is that this very damaged, very hurt man, in the end found some, obviously, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. I'm talking about someone like I know them, and it's your dad and your husband. I apologize for that, but it's a character that I played. He is a character I played. Found some salvation, some peace, some ease from these inner torments by becoming a father and learning what love is. Not something you get from people that he was missing so badly, but something you give, that he learned to give to Jennifer. And I felt that when not get too emotional because she's in the audience, when my daughter was born, I felt like I belonged suddenly. I was anchored somewhere, and that's something that I felt a kinship with him about.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Sorry, darling. I won't even look at you so they know where you're sitting. Sorry. But it's true.
Dyan, for you, did you feel you were married to Archibald Leach or to Cary Grant or both?
I was married to a man who loved me, a man that I loved, and really that wasn't it. Cary, when I was in Rome filming, and Cary called my agent for a part for me in a movie. And I said, is he going to pay my way back? And they said, no. I said, then I'm not coming home. And I was having such a good time in Rome. It was such a creative time in film and the artists, and it was all new for me, and I was so excited. And I came home, and my agent took me to meet him one day. I didn't know I was going to meet Cary. And we actually did talk for 4 hours. Time just flew. And I left, and I didn't, at that moment, ask him about the movie, because I'd forgotten about the movie, because the connection was so strong. Oh. But my little voice said, don't go there. So he actually called me for about 8 months before I went out with him.
Oh, good heavens.
My little voice he was older than my father, and he had had 3 marriages, and I thought, but how big is your butt, right? but when he walked into a room, he owned it. I have never experienced that kind of a presence. He walked into a room, and then when he would walk over to me, I'd go, oh, wait a minute. He's important, and that made me feel important, and he won me over. But he had an it factor like no one I've ever seen.
This is the stuff
before.
you told me on the phone that I hated you for. Dyan was incredible on the phone, and both Jennifer and Dyan were amazing. He helped myself and the brilliant Laura, who plays Dyan in the film. But you would tell me so many useful, fabulous things about his emotional landscape, and then just say, and he would walk into a room, honey, and everybody wanted him. And I go, can we get back to something useful? It's really, you can't really play that.
Well, that's going to happen for you now, Jason.
Well,
You're going to walk into a room, and
I've been
everybody's
around-
going to want you.
I've been around a few years. Maybe if I painted myself dark brown and stuck a chin on, I don't know.
But I have to say, even in films, when Cary Grant is on camera, on the screen, I can't look at anyone.
You can't look at anyone else.
No.
No. He had that sense of himself, oddly, even though he was in turmoil.
When he was playing someone, he did.
Pardon me?
When he was playing, he didn't always have that with you alone.
No.
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 We should let someone else.
But has there ever been anyone like him on the screen? Ever?
No.
Ever? That looked like that had that dandy, that had that humor, that had that drama, that had... I mean, he was the whole package.
And confidence also. I mean,
Yes.
you just believed whatever he happened to be.
That's right.
Yes.
You know, well, you could both contradict me, and you guys are obviously a huge fan, but maybe we'll get to it later on. But I got to hear a very private interview that was recorded that wasn't meant to be public, and a guy held on to it for 40 years, and he shared it with me. And when he was a student at the time, asked him, who's the best actress you ever worked with? He worked with Ingrid Bergman, he worked with Katharine Hepburn, he worked with people who were Oscar nominated. He said Grace Kelly. And he didn't just say her name, he said, because she was so relaxed. He stressed it a few times. He said, because that's the hardest thing to be. It actually isn't the hardest thing to do. You're a magnificent actress, I've seen you act, and you're relaxed when you're doing it. So although it looked effortless, I think there was something else going on for him. I think it was work for him in a way that it wasn't for other people because of things going on inside. Because she's a strange one to pick out of that incredible array of actresses he worked with to say was the best. But it's that quality he admired, because I don't think he did relax on the screen. I mean, he brought an energy to it that made you watch him. But I'm
Maybe,
sure it was
maybe
right.
that's a better way of explaining it. Whatever he did, it was great.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Jennifer, what's your perspective on this conversation about your father?
Well, it's interesting because I think, I found him incredibly relaxed. Of course, we were in the kitchen or, playing backgammon or hanging out at home. But I didn't see very much difference between the Cary Grant that walked into a room and owned it and the Cary Grant at home. I think he was very much the same person. But again, that was later in his life. And I think he'd grown into himself. So...
I was going to say, I think it's what makes this story so relevant is that he created the character of Cary Grant initially, and I think it's a great way of putting it that he grew into that. There's a wonderful thing that Cary said when he said as he got to an older man, and he had this dichotomy of Archie and Cary, and initially he wanted to put Archie in a box because Archie equaled hurt, and he became Cary and forgot about Archie.
And nobody loved Archie.
No, that's right. As a boy, he didn't. But then he said, as an older man, he said one day, he said, I decided to introduce Archie to Cary, and you know what? They got along just fine. And he said that himself, and I thought that was fascinating little insight. But what I think is so interesting is that, especially now, my sons, their friends, there's very much this Insta world that we live in when, we've all talked about this. You'll post a picture of yourself, and it'll be a filter to make you look fantastic, and you'll take a picture of where you are, and you're projecting all the time this amazing life that you're having, which may not necessarily equate actually with the life that you're having. And so this very much is in that world. He created a character, which was Cary, which wasn't a true reflection as a younger man of Archie Leach. And so I do think there is a relevance with today, with this notion of
curating your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But imagine that he could create that he could envisage it for himself growing up as a boy in Bristol. That's what I find so fascinating. He didn't have the examples.
No, well, when he first went across on the boat, and then when he was in Hollywood, there were these people that he aspired to being. He acquired bits of Douglas Fairbanks, bits of other actors, their voice, the angle of their hands in their pocket even. He studied, he was such a smart man. He studied and built for himself this composite character. But his later films, where, he wasn't phoning the young women in his films for 8 months. They had to pursue him. He curated the very opposite of who he was and lived through it. It was an avatar in a way. It was and the world fell in love with this creature who was almost the opposite emotionally of who he was.
Well,
Which serves a therapeutic need.
That's the reason he's
I might disagree.
so brilliant in this miniseries, because the work he did, the research he did, I'm an actress, I understand, but playing someone's life, and someone's life like Cary Grant, that's not just a life, that's a legend.
Yes.
And he spent weeks and months and hours, and he would ask me questions that no one has ever asked me. I mean,
well,
he really,
I don't think anybody else wants to hear some of the stuff I asked you.
but he really nailed Cary. He got Cary.
His voice.
That's not easy.
Movie.
He got his heart, he got his soul, he got his turmoil, he got the whole package of who Cary is.
I will take as much flattery as you can possibly give, but just for a second, to park that, we can come back to that happily. But the fact is, you can only be on screen three-dimensional if you're given the material. And what we got, you wrote, and you gave us, I had his daughter's perspective, and you adored him, and he was a wonderful dad. You had I'm sorry to say this if it causes anyone upset, you had a terrible marriage by the end. It was very damaging in many ways and very difficult for you. And so I had these different perspectives of the same man. We all know that we can be different people in different situations. I also got to read all the biographies, but also other people's biographies and the minutes of the business meetings. He was so many people in so many different places. And that makes a lot of sense. And we all recognize that about ourselves, I think. And as an actor, you look much better when you get to play. That's why long-form television is so great. You don't drive to the end in simplistic storylines. And I look better because of all the work that you did and that you gave me. But in the end, what the audience gets is a rounded picture of how complex people are and how complex marriage can be.
But isn't it interesting how often we look at some marriages or some couples up there and we think, oh, what a wonderful life. What a great life. Oh, I wish I could have a life like that. And then you look behind the scenes, sometimes it isn't always that way.
Frequently.
There's a big lesson in life about that, I think, you know.
But you really were a storybook couple by appearances.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want my 27-year-old daughter to marry a 61-year-old man. I'm not sure about that.
Well, I'm still very glad they got together.
That's absolutely true.
I was going to say that the inspiration for doing it was, I want to say that it's not a biopic. That wasn't my inspiration, because sometimes they can fall into the trap of a sequence of events. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. So if there are issues in Cary's life, if he has demons, if he has problems, you know, he was married. Dyan was his fourth wife, and then there was another marriage after Dyan. The why, that was the point of this, why. And so it's a spoiler alert, but as you saw in episode 1, he's told his mother's passed away. 20 plus years later, he's now Cary Grant, he's not Archie Leach anymore, he's a huge star, incredibly beautiful man, sought after, popular. And then his father gets in touch and says, I've got to tell you something, your mother's still alive. And it's like, well, how on earth do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? And so that was, I mean, I've said this a lot, is it felt to me, first time we met, it felt to me almost like a story Dickens would have written. I was thinking of Great Expectations, or, you know, Pip and Magwitch. And so that was a massive drive for me to tell this story, is to just what a dramatic narrative that is for this man to go through all that and then find out his mother was still alive.
Also, if you sorry.
No, I was going to.
Well, if anyone created that in fiction, if that was being developed by executives somewhere,
Yeah.
she'd come out and it'd all be warm and rosy.
Yeah.
But actually, he'd spent so many decades taking LSD with a therapist and seeking every other kind of ease for this terrible pain he felt, the nightmares he woke up with, all the screaming and crying, and all the abandonment issues. And when she came out, and he found that she's still alive, she was pretty difficult. I mean, she was very difficult to him. He felt that she still couldn't love. She was very hard, maybe just being institutionalized. So nothing in his life played smoothly. And sometimes real life is so much better than that you can create than fiction, because fiction, we're led down certain tropes, certain paths that you want to tie up neatly, and that life didn't tie up neatly.
You had some interesting times with Elsie, didn't you, Dyan?
With
Elsie.
Cary's
yes,
mum.
yes.
So Dyan went to visit, didn't you?
She was so angry and so deserved to be.
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg told me that her father did the same thing to her mother. So you take her to the doctor and you say, honey, come on, we're going to get you some help. We're going to get you the help you need, and then he signs her in, and they...
Wow.
So you can imagine the woman's life was taken from her, so that when she saw her son 30 years later, she said, where's my little Archie? I don't know. Who are you? Who are you? She had her life stolen, and she was so strong. There was a few nice moments with her, but for the most part, she kept calling me Betsy, which was Cary's wife before me. She wasn't keen on me. She wasn't really keen on anyone who was in Cary's life. She wanted to be his girl, and I understand that. But she was an incredibly strong woman. We were walking down the hospital corridor one day, and a doctor was walking towards us, and the corridor was very narrow, and she pulled me to her side of the corridor. She was physically strong and obviously mentally as strong, because she endured all that terrible treatment.
There's a lot. It was a line. Actually, it was a line Jason came. Although I've stolen it and claim it as mine, which is he could not give her life back. She could not give him his childhood back, and that's why they were doomed to never. You know, they had that tremendous attraction of mother and son, but when they got together, there were the things that were pushing them apart. It was terrible, really, agonizing, what they both had to go through.
Jeff, I had a revelation while I was watching the movie today. While I was watching the series, I'd never seen it before. How when his supposed grandmother came in and saw him eating the candy bar, Cary used to keep on the left side of his bed. My side was the right side. His side was the left side. And he kept a drawer with picnic bars in it. And when I'd go in that drawer to take picnic bars without his permission, I'd get hell.
Yeah.
And I realized that that's where it started today when I saw that. I never realized that before.
He was, I mean, so I whispered to Jen when we were watching it, I think he was hungry a lot of his youth.
Yeah.
I mean, really genuinely starving. His grandmother was very abusive and alcoholic. His father was gone. I think he was literally starving for food. And so when there was that's why he ate everything. You document so well.
Finished everyone's plate.
Finished everyone's food. And then you were saying he wrapped up if things were left from breakfast.
Yeah.
He'd wrap them up and
Wanted
save for
everyone's
lunch.
plate.
And he cut buttons off his shirts to save. But even when he was a very wealthy man.
We had a stock pot. Yeah.
My
we
dad's
used to put things
91.
into.
He's been fined for, he's got a roof over his head, has for a long time. He still has nightmares about the bailiffs that used to come to his house when he was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And I think that the scars were deeper in Cary, and those wounds were open really until you came along. And
Way before, yeah.
Yeah, the way before. The more love he got from the world, the less lovable he felt. It did because he knew it wasn't love for him. It was love for a fake character.
You know how they say that when people get married, marriages change? Well, that's exactly what happened in our marriage. After we got married, it changed. And I realize now that it was because he had to abandon us before we abandoned him. He was so frightened of abandonment.
Yeah.
And it's so, as you see the rest of the series, you'll really understand why.
And the more you say, she's going to leave me, she's going to leave me, that becomes, of course, a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's
And
right.
I think that repeated that.
There's something else as well, the control that you haven't seen, hopefully you will watch the rest of it, but the way he wanted to dress you and make you act a certain way and eat things and just control who you were. If you've had a life of such chaos when you were a child, such chaos and carnage and anarchy, then maybe if you can control every element of your life, you can keep that kind of chaos outside the door. So anything that is unpredictable threatens you and scares you. And I think it partly came from that too.
I think so.
He was also pretty fun.
I know. You know what? I knew you were going to say that.
He was.
You're a very different person, I think.
I want to thank Jennifer, because when we'd pretty much got picture lock, she said there's something that we should do at the end. And she raided her archive of photos and cine. So this would have been in the 60s. Cine film of, and in the end section, over the end credits, there are the most wonderful, completely off-guard family snaps that Jennifer helped us with and provided. There's a wonderful sequence where Jennifer's got some friends around and he's wearing this flowery silk shirt and he's dancing with them.
It's a caftan. Let's call it what
It is, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
He wore
It is,
caftans at home. You wouldn't let me do it on camera, but he did. Oh, go on.
But what jumps out of the images are a dad. He just so loved, he's so proud and loved being a dad. And so whatever else was happening, you just see a man, not... If this is about Archie, you see Archie, you see the real man, which isn't to say Cary wasn't a real man, but you just see this man who loved being a dad. And it's so wonderful that he found peace towards the end of his life.
Isn't it? The love he felt for you was every other relationship was so complicated for him, and the love he felt for you was so uncomplicated.
I think I had that sort of a relationship with Elsie as well.
Yeah.
She was lovely with me,
Yeah.
you know? So I got to see the sweet side,
Yeah.
the warm.
She wasn't so keen on Betsy.
No.
I just finally said, okay. But you know, the relationship between a husband and a wife is much different than that between a daughter and a father. It's a whole different scene. But did you all enjoy what you saw? I didn't intend to ask you that.
Yeah, he wasn't the only one who could work a crowd, obviously.
But they didn't have to clap like that. Jeff wrote an amazing piece, and this guy went to town with it, and all the other actors as well, right? What?
We don't talk about me. Next question. That's fine.
I think that's your way of bringing tension to yourself.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Jason, can we go back to something you said earlier about
Yeah.
a sequestered recording of Cary Grant?
Sure.
Because it was important for you, was it not?
Well, I mean, there's the outside of stuff, and the makeup they did an incredible job, Liz Headley, and the costumes are all Savile Row tailored suits, and I tried to get his walk, and there's the rest of it, but the voice was scary because everyone went, "Can you do the voice yet? Can you do the voice yet?" Most people, I think, are remembering Tony Curtis as Something Like It Hot. They're not really thinking about Cary's voice at all. But I watched all the films. His accent changed a lot from when he first got there. When he was doing what was supposedly Cockney in those films, it's really very, very far from Cockney. And in some of the films, I think he's doing his best American accent. But mostly, when I broke it down, he had the same intonation pattern all the time. And I thought, there's no way he talks like that when someone spills hot coffee in his lap or something. There's just not... Who was he when he was just being alone with Jen making pancakes? So, and I couldn't find a chat show. I couldn't find him on the radio. Laura, who played Dyan, she had a recording of you and Johnny Carson. She played 1,000 times. I couldn't find Cary, just being candid. Jennifer lent me the DVDs very kindly, but there's a couple of times he's whispering because he's trying to film her secretly, and she's onto him and tries to get away from the camera all the time. But there was nothing. And then I found an interview that looked like a transcript to me, but the journalist didn't seem to work anymore. I tracked him down on social media. I wrote to him and said, "Was this a transcript?" And he was at first very guarded. I said, "Who are you? Why are you calling?" And I finally got him to talk to me, and I said, I'm an actor. I'm playing Cary Grant, and I think your interview might have been a recorded interview. Was it? And he told me the full story. He was a student journalist, and he'd written in the year that Cary died in 1986, he'd written to his Stanley, I think, or someone, a representative, saying, "We're doing a festival of his films at my university. Any chance of an answer to some written interviews?" And he got a letter back saying, "If you call this number Saturday morning, he'll talk to you." And he went down to the university radio department, and he put headphones on, and then he called. Barbara answered, and she said, "Hold on a second, I'll just get Cary." And he went, and Cary came on the phone, and the first thing he says is, "You're not recording this, are you?" And he went, "Well, yeah, I've got it." And he goes, I don't want you to." And so he said to his friend, and they spoke for about an hour, and at the end his friend said, "I did record it, obviously." and I spoke to him and I said, "Please play it to me." And he said, "I haven't played it to anyone in 40 years. Wow. And I begged him, and he very kindly sent me a private link to it, which I shared with you guys. And that, for the first time, made me feel like I might be able to play. I heard a person. I heard Archie/Cary, and a man with very different. On screen, he has this absolute certainty. I don't want to get too technical, but he's got a resolving intonation pattern, a kind of major key every time he speaks. But when in life, he was in life, and he had a very different way of speaking. And I thought I could hear fault lines that led all the way back to him being a child in it. And for me, a voice spoke across the generations, and I felt ready to go to the set. I still didn't say anything out loud until the first take. People go, do you want to run it by me? And I go, no. And I was terrified when we first.
It is, because as you say, everyone's actually thinking, as you say, of Tony Curtis in Operation Petticoat. But
Like It Hot.
is that what he was?
Stuff Like It Hot,
Oh, yeah, he was in Operation Petticoat. Some Like It Hot. But I still love it every time when he said movie. Like that. It's just that. No one talks like that. And
It's a very unusual voice.
you think there's some New York in his accent, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I could definitely. Look, I had nothing like his life, but as an actor, you try and find bits where you overlap. I come from Liverpool. I had a Liverpool accent until I was 11. We moved to London. I had a London accent with about 8 seconds of arriving at school. I went to university. They all sound like Hugh Grant. Honestly, before the rain had dried on my feet, I sound like Hugh Grant. And I have that code switching thing, which is not a great thing socially. I obviously have a precarious grip of my own personality, but I've turned it into a professional asset. And I think he did that thing of, he wasn't very good at accents, but he wanted to fit in. I think in New York, he wanted to fit in. He was a young actor who couldn't get work on the stage.
Yeah.
And those are the voices around him. Then he went to Hollywood, where everyone was trying to sound English. So there's that strange anglicized 1930s accent, and ended up being a hybrid of those things.
Yeah,
And without that tape, I think I would have been screwed.
yeah.
But he came here first. And I think it's lovely that we're
Yes.
having the premiere
Yes.
here
Yes.
in New York. Yeah. And thank you to Maureen Reedy and to Camilla Olson, who is the silent partner here, who brought us together for this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's curious that if you ask British people, Cary Grant, they would say, yeah, Cary Grant was American.
Yeah.
But there's a question mark there, I think. And as I understand it, Americans think, no, he's American, I think. And there's this kind of, he was also, he appealed completely universally. He was adored equally by men and women who went to watch him. Sometimes, a really handsome guys watching him might think, it's not for me. He's the ladies' man. But men love to watch him. Women love to watch him just as much. And there was a fascinating detail we talked about, which was that the Kennedys were intrigued by him. His ability to appeal to all strata of society. It was poor guys with just working class guys loved him, and wealthy people, equally. So this thing about there was never a chat show that you could never find. He was elusive. You couldn't. It's like a bar of soap. You could never quite get him.
So I think, again, I'm talking about someone that you both knew very well, but our version of him, I think he was worried that were he to be somewhere without it being planned and carefully controlled, he might have let slip some things that showed them how vulnerable he was, or how emotional he was, or the very opposite of this character he curated on the screen, who was always so certain in every situation and always in control of things and so masculine. And I think that you told me how nervous he was about making public speeches. He turned down awards his whole life if he had to make a speech. No, he didn't want to.
Well, he did make speeches, he did, but he would plan so carefully, and he would start writing weeks before, and then he would edit it, and then he would get it to the place where it was on cue cards, and he would have a few key lines, but he knew all of the back. Yeah. Wow. And he was miserable for the day before. Wouldn't speak to anyone the day before. Yeah.
But that's the point of you telling this story. You may not have thought this was the point. You thought the point was you read Jennifer's book, biggest star in the world, gives it up to be a father. But actually, what you wrote, and I think what emerged is the biggest star in the world was nothing like the character he played on screen. It was the very opposite. That's a story that today, for people who, there are a million more stars now that come through our phones and iPads. There are so many people in the world. Andy Warhol was right, but it's longer than 15 minutes, whose lives look perfect, and it's almost never true. And the more they want and need it, that he, not consciously, but wanted and needed it, the more likely it is that they're the very opposite at home.
Yeah, and this little kid, 14, 15, comes to America, to New York here, and says, you know what, I'm not coming home.
Yeah.
There's nothing there for me. Stays here. That kid then he was one of the first, if not the first, movie stars to not be under contract to a studio. He said, "No, I'll do your movie here, and then the next one that I really want to do, I'll do it at your studio there." I mean, towards the end of his career, his deal was that he was paid, you know, as well as anyone was paid. But after I think it was a year or 18 months, he owned the film. Can you imagine that?
It was a very, very smart businessman.
Yeah.
There was some, I mean, a lot of the biographies got things right, but a lot of them got things wrong. Some of them said that it was a vanity credit. When he was on the board of Fabergé and on the board of MGM and stuff, it was so that he could have access to a plane. And actually, I read the business meeting. The
That
notes.
is how obsessed he was. He read the
Yeah.
business.
But they respected him.
minutes.
He made some very smart business decisions
Yeah.
and made them a lot of money. He was a great businessman, self-educated.
Yeah.
But I think he learned something, just maybe this is the personal thing, I think he learned something very early on when he was in New York even, when he was, who knows what he was doing for these rich people he was hired, women he was hired to entertain. I think he learned to make people, well, he was, you know.
He was
by
having
the way-
lunch with them.
No, I think he learned how to make people like him and love him because he needed to. He was hungry and desperate and poor. And it's a skill he learned and used a lot in his life. And then he magnified it till he made the whole world love him. But it didn't work. No.
Well, the world did love him, but yeah, it didn't fill necessarily the void.
Yeah.
It was a little baby girl.
In case we don't go on, because I see the time here, I just want to say one thing in front of everybody else. This is fun for us. We tell stories for a living, and
Yeah.
you have both put yourself out there to tell something so personal. You've done it in your book too, but I admire you so much for doing this because you really adored a lovely man, and you knew that you were going to tell a story about some other sides of his character that you didn't see and find difficult to process. And I think you're so extraordinary for allowing this to happen and for supporting it. It's really remarkable.
Thank you.
Dyan,
Thanks.
I want to ask you, are there memories of Cary Grant that aren't captured in the series?
Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, he gets the soul of the man, the heart of the man. But, you know, I realize now how much we used to stay home alone. I didn't ever really think about that. We stayed home most nights. We didn't go to parties. Occasionally went out to dinner. But for the most part, we stayed home, ate on the bed, dinner, watching the telly. And, you know, I was sharing with somebody tonight, 4 or 5 months ago, I went into my closet where my safe is, and I took out
Tell everyone where your safe is.
Yeah. Anybody here, you're welcome. There's not a lot in it. But I took out some letters from Cary. He was so adorable. He was so funny. His heart was so sweet, really. He would write me letters and do drawings, and I kind of fell in love with him again, which made me feel really good because it took me a long time to heal. But I just want you to know that the heart of the man, the sweetness of the man, the purity of the man inside, when he'd make those little drawings and write letters about having another burger and not really wanting to go to work was dear.
Will you tell everyone what you said when we were asked what's your favourite Cary Grant film? And we all had our favourite films. And you said, don't remember?
No.
The films we made at home.
Oh, yes. What was our famous, what was your best film, Dyan? What was your favorite film of Cary's? I said the ones we made at home.
That's wonderful. But on that topic, what are your favorite films, everyone?
An Affair to Remember.
Ah.
Because it was an affair to remember.
Indeed it was.
I just have to share a moment that for me, I want to share this with you. It just suddenly comes to me. That's the most romantic moment of my life. Cary and I had been dating for maybe 8 or 9 months, and La Cienega Boulevard is a very busy boulevard in Los Angeles. And after dinner, we decided to walk home. We sent the driver back with the car, and we decided to walk home. And we got to about halfway up La Cienega Boulevard, which is usually very, very busy, and it was quiet that night. And he said, hold it. And he had left me standing on the curb, and he walked out to the middle of the street. And he turned to me and he said, do you know how I feel about you? I said, no. And he fell, he did a pratfall on the sidewalk, which is like a redwood. He went face down on the sidewalk. And he turned up and looked at me and said, head over heels.
Sweet. Aww.
Head over heels. And he came and he picked me up and he kissed me. I've never had a moment like that in my life. I'll never forget it, that dear. Head over heels.
That's beautiful.
To Catch a Thief.
Oh, thank you, Jeff.
To Catch a Thief. Best film, favorite film, To Catch a Thief.
I just
Okay.
watched it again last night, probably for the 50th time.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. What's yours, Jennifer?
I can't choose one. I love An Affair to Remember.
Yeah.
I also love Bringing Up Baby. It's sweet.
I like His Girl Friday because even though it's on film, it's clearly a vaudeville act. It's the end of the pier. You could do it in street theatre. It's delivered at 5 times the speed that any human
Yeah.
being speaks, unless it's the medical disclaimer at the end of a hemorrhoid cream advert. It's phenomenal. The double takes and the pratfalls and the whole knockabout fast of it all is something he could do that no one else could do.
Yeah.
That's right. But you did it.
Yes.
I'm going to segue to some audience questions, which we received in advance. This is from Linda Porto, who was a Paley member. Did Cary Grant ever express regrets about not taking any roles? And in particular, I wasn't going to show Linda's hand here, but I'm going to. In particular, the James Mason part in A Star is Born.
That won an Oscar. There were a couple of parts he turned down that won an Oscar.
And the Laurence Olivier role in Sleuth, 1971.
Well, it retired by then, didn't it?
He did say to me, darling, I'm very sorry that I didn't take the Bond role. I could have made you a lot more money.
He would have been the perfect James Bond. Well, he is James
Well,
Bond.
it was written
in
to
many
be
ways.
him, wasn't it? You know?
It was?
Yeah. They created it for him. There were a few, so the biographies all say, but you can tell me if it's not true, that he really would have liked an Oscar a lot. And the studios were very upset with him because not only did he become the first person to work as a freelancer, but he also sued them for profits they held back all the time. And that made him very unpopular. And so they weren't going to let him be nominated or win for a long time. But there
Jack
were
Warner still owes him money.
Right. Yeah. And there were parts that came along that were outside. As time went by, he began really to find, because he was so smart, so canny, what he thought audiences liked that he should do on screen, and the kind of template for a typical Cary Grant film. And when he was offered a couple of times things that are way outside that, like James Mason part, he didn't do them. And I regret that he didn't do them because he didn't really stretch himself as an actor later on because he knew what he did well and they were big box office hits. And I'd like to have seen what he did outside of his comfort zone.
He would come home after shooting scenes with in Charade, and he kept saying, I'm too old to be opposite her. I'm too old. He really worried about the age difference between he and Audrey Hepburn. But that was the only time I heard him complain about that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then you'd say, but she's older than me.
Yeah.
It's one of the rows coming up that we have in the thing, yeah.
So this is from Tim Moore, who's also a Paley member. What would Cary Grant say about today's films being mostly comic book movies and big effects?
He'd probably love them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Really?
He loved
You
the
would think,
laughs.
yeah.
On
You
the
think they were
interview that-
technological marvels.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the interview that I heard, this young man who can't believe his luck and he can't believe that Cary Grant's staying on the phone for so long, he says, well, what do you, don't you think that you made better comedies? Do you really made comedies happen?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
aren't today's films terrible? And he goes, no, I just came back on the plane from Wimbledon. I just saw Back to the Future. It was hilarious. I was laughing, falling out of my seat. He loved films. He also thought the films he made were irrelevant. They didn't matter. He mentioned the fact that you didn't care to watch them and he didn't mind. And he thinks they're all pieces of ephemera and they're only movies. So he was loving the movies that he watched when I listened to.
He loved sports. He loved soccer. He loved baseball. He loved Wimbledon. We went to
Yeah.
Wimbledon several times. Yeah, he liked life. He enjoyed those sporting events.
Yeah.
He enjoyed that.
Yeah.
From Robin Levin, What is the biggest misconception the public has about Cary Grant?
Oh. Well, watch the 4 hours. That's, I mean, you know. The biggest
answer.
misconception is that he was Cary Grant, that you know him from the films, to my mind. Obviously, he was with Jen, someone different.
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I don't know, really.
Read Dyan's book.
I think one of the misconceptions was that he was gay. I think that was a big one, and they mentioned that in England in the
It comes up a lot, yeah.
yeah, and I never saw that. I never ever saw an indication of that. While he was with me, he was my boy. But I think that's a misconception. I never saw it, and people ask me that question all the time. But as far as I'm concerned, no, he liked the ladies.
Well, he was married with you, and you had a full marital relationship. But when he was 20 and 30 and 40...
I wasn't there then.
no, exactly. As documented by all the biographers, he had many relationships, including one very long one with a man. But when I asked Jeff about that, when I first went there to talk about the scripts, and I said, I really feel like we have to acknowledge that, according to everyone who's done research, he had a long relationship with a man. The fact is, we're telling the story about the period when he's with Dyan, and when he was with you, and he loved you, and you had a child. So we acknowledge later on that he had many relationships with many people, and we don't...
It wouldn't have changed my mind about him at all.
No.
I mean, but I think it's a misconception.
Well, that he's gay, yes. That he had relationships with men when he was younger, it
Maybe.
would seem...
Well,
really
who
sure.
knows if he had an affair? He may have had an affair when he was younger, but I agree with you, Mom. I never saw a hint of it. And it's not that I would try to hide it, especially today, when you can be any color of the rainbow. And hopefully it's all accepted. At least I think it's all accepted here in New York, so I can speak about it right here. But I never felt a hint, saw a hint. He was watching women. It was very clear that he was heterosexual.
He himself, of course, addressed it rather elegantly when he said, I've been accused of many things in my life. I've been accused of being careful with money, and I've been accused of being gay, neither of which I consider to be an insult. Which,
Good answer.
Yeah.
Great answer.
Yes. I think we have the answer to this question. It's from Jim Lansing. Is there an actor today who embodies Cary Grant's persona? Jason Isaacs.
No. There's nobody around who is as famous and as loved all over all the world, because there were, television wasn't, when he started off acting, television was as big as it was, and clearly there wasn't the internet and Instagram and all the rest of it. So it's not just what he did on screen, it's the fact that there weren't that many people that the whole world knew and loved. At some point he said, I can't remember if it was one of the material we looked at, he said, there's a bit of pressure when you're doing a scene and you think 300 million people are going to watch this in a few weeks' time. And I don't know that there's anybody who has that today, so he had something different going on.
Well, I will tell you, it was very challenging to find someone to play Dad.
I can only
Play
imagine.
Cary Grant, to play Archie
cheap
Leach.
enough.
A lot
It
of big
was-
stars were afraid.
It was, I mean, there was a point where Jeff was quite dispirited.
Jack
I
Black,
thought you were going to say Jeff was going to play himself.
Right, yeah.
Jack Black turned us down.
No, but finally we found someone with the cojones and the talent to step up to the role. Yeah.
The answer to your question is because I've thought about it a lot. Maybe a kind of mix of George Clooney and Tom Hanks was the nearest I came to
No.
a modern day.
Not good.
But
No,
Betsy doesn't agree.
That's on,
Who do you think does?
that's
No
on
one.
screen. It was such a different person on
tell you,
screen.
I think we do that in life. We try and compare frick and frack. And I don't think,
Yeah,
honestly,
right,
that you can compare him to anyone.
I would agree.
No, he was unique. He was, when I was married to him, he was the biggest star in the world who, was happy with TV dinners at home.
I love that.
But nobody on the screen has ever done what he did with that swag and that look and that comedy and that. He was.
My wife is a brilliantly perceptive woman, and as my daughter would tell you, she's the smart one in the relationship. She used to make documentaries. And at one point, she was making a series of documentaries about acting, the underbelly of acting, the desperation of acting. But she had famous talking heads. And I was working with a very, very famous person. And
Who?
no, I can't tell the story because you'll see why. Anyway, I said, you should ask him to be in it. And she said, I can't possibly ask him. I said, well, he's very famous. He's one of the highest paid actors in the world. She said, he's too self-conscious. And I went, self-conscious? He's like the whole world. She went, the reason you can't take your eyes off him is there's something going on behind the eyes, which isn't quite right, something a bit broken. It makes him absolutely magnetic, but he wouldn't be good in a documentary because he's so uncomfortable in his own skin. And not that your dad was particularly uncomfortable in his own skin necessarily, but I think one of the things that made him mesmeric is what you see was very much not what you got. There was an entirely different personality struggling inside. That's why he took acid. Oh, time's up. Right. I think the egg's ready. There was an entirely different person struggling inside there that created this thing, and it's the tension between what he could do so brilliantly and who he really was that made him so hypnotic.
I think Hitchcock saw something in his eyes, because he'd done screwball comedies, light work, leading man stuff, and then these wonderful dark thrillers. And
Hitchcock knew him socially, though.
Yes.
He knew about his marriages. He knew about his relationships and the trouble he had in life.
And I think that's why he cast him in those films, and he was magnificent in them. But I do think something like that happened, and they remained friends, didn't they?
Yep,
Him
all
and
their
Hitch.
lives. Yeah.
He
I
didn't
would
have the
say it's
capacity.
his vulnerability, though.
Yeah.
Sure, it's
The
a combination of all
vulnerability
those.
to see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vulnerability allied with rage or the ability or the desire to control. Even in Notorious, that's a terrible person that he plays. They tacked on a happy ending, but the things that he does to Ingrid Bergman. And Hitchcock knew him and thought, I know he can do this on screen. And he must have seen something in life that was the very opposite of what he'd so far played.
Well, imagine all of the opinions about Dad. Mom's opinion, right? Mom's knowledge of Dad. Your thoughts about Dad. Mine. Barbara, who's my stepmother and his last wife. And Jeff took this big melting pot and he sort of stirred it all up. And I find it miraculous that you came up with a version that we all agree with. Really.
That's a good point, Jim.
Well, I want to thank our panelists, and I'm certain the audience is feeling the way that I am. Thank you. Which is, this has not only been high-spirited and uplifting, but hugely educational. I can't thank you enough, really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to our host.
Oh, please.